everyone. Welcome to our e-commerce 101 webinar. I'm Megan McCarthy, editor of Modern Marketing. I'd like to introduce our panelists. Gerald Yap, creative director at In Detail. Marcus Matzi, head of SEO at Reprise. Jared Mailer-Lyons from the Media Shop. Derek Sykes, commercial director at Payflex. And Vanessa Dewing, head of multinational customers and CSI Sub-Saharan Africa at DHL. I'd like to thank our webinar sponsors, In Detail and DHL. Just some housekeeping rules for our attendees. If you have a question for the panelists, please post these in the questions section. We will have a dedicated question and answer session after the panelists' presentations. And also remember to take our e-commerce polls in the poll section. So let's get started with Gerald. Gerald, can a business take their existing website and turn it into an e-commerce website?
Most websites nowadays are built on a CMS system, so a content management system, which allow for the plugin or the addition of e-commerce. Obviously, e-commerce has become extremely popular. Everybody wants e-commerce, so you'll find that like popular platforms, hosted, systems, CMS systems like WordPress, you can easily add on WooCommerce to add on the e-commerce functionality onto your website. But there's two you can. So it depends on how your site is set up. But there's also a lot of the popular systems like Wix have also even added on e-commerce systems that you can add onto your website. So there's a lot of options, but what you need to understand is there's obviously there's two options. You can either have a self-hosted or a hosted option for e-commerce. But e-commerce is getting extremely popular, and there is actually no better time than to do an e-commerce store than now. Obviously with the whole C-19 virus, people are scared to go to the stores. They'd rather stay indoors. It's also the virus is also given a lot of people that previously wouldn't have bought online are now buying online. So there's a huge demand now for people to buy online. In fact, there was a survey recently in the UK, and they asked people, how many people would go back to buying at a normal shop, and only 37% said they would go back to buying at a normal store. I mean, that's 1 in 3. That's not a lot of people. Their poll was a little bit different from restaurants in that everybody said they'll go back to a restaurant, but a lot of people said they'd rather buy online if they needed a product. So an interesting fact actually also for the advertising industry is the outdoor advertising has also grown, it has become more prominent, because what they're finding is that if you're going outdoor, it means that you're braver and you want to get back to normal life, and you're more likely to make a purchase or do something. So the outdoor advertising is going to become more popular. But yeah, so I'll go into some more of it in the next question. There is most sites you can actually add on e-commerce.
Okay, great. And what are the key elements needed to set up an e-commerce website?
So a lot of the other guys will be touching on the various elements in this talk. But obviously, when you start up an e-commerce website, a lot of people think that it's oh well, we'll just create an e-commerce website, and I'm guilty of it as well. When I created my first e-commerce website, I thought, let me just create it, and I'll wake up in the morning and there'll just magically be orders there that I just have to fulfill. It's not quite like that. There's a couple of things you've got to go through. So obviously the first thing is you've got to create a system and put all the products and catalog all your products, create it in such a way that it's very easy for people to find what they're looking for. You've got to obviously make sure that it's very easy to find the product that you're looking for. You'll need to have a payment gateway. So obviously, like when people go to your store, they'll need to pay for the product. You can opt obviously for EFT. EFT is very laborious. You want to actually do a payment gateway. The difference with the payment gateway is if someone does a payment on your website using EFT, you manually have to wait for their payment to clear before you can release the product. That could take 2 to 3 days, which is very frustrating for a customer. A payment gateway will give you instant feedback that a payment has been successful and you can release it. So ideally, you do want a payment gateway. Payment gateway will obviously make it a lot easier for the user. Then you'll obviously, now the product's been bought, you've got to get it to the customer. So you need shipping. And a lot of the time, what we see it with customers who come in, they forget about how important the shipping part of it is. They think, oh, well, no, we'll just deliver it ourselves. What's the problem with that? You can't, because if you want to open up your shop to be able to sell countrywide. You want to be able to sell it to anybody in the country. So the shipping option becomes very, very for time with your shipping. You must obviously capture the information with every project, every product. You must have the weights and the dimensions. And most of the shipping companies will have a plugin or an API that will automatically calculate the cost of the shipping between the shop and the customer's address and add that to the cart. So that takes also a lot of pressure off your hands, because all you need to do is have the product ready, call up the shipping company you want to work with, they'll pick up and deliver, and the shipping's covered in your cost of the sale. So you've got to make sure your shipping's in place. Now, there's also some things around the shipping that you've also got to get your mind around, because obviously some products aren't easy to ship. We've got one customer who sells Turkish carpets, and they're a nightmare to ship. You know, they're sometimes like 3 meters in length, you know, so they're quite a difficult product to ship. So you can also, in your shipping options, you can also set certain parameters. Like, for example, maybe you've got big items. You can then set certain items that maybe you have trucks and you need to deliver, and the range of those trucks is only in Gauteng. So you can set different shipping options for different products as well. So they can take take the pressure off your hands. But yes, you do need a shipping company. You need a partner with a courier company, and a long-term partnership with a courier company. Then one of the key elements that a lot of people don't realize is with an online store is you need time. This is, the way you need to treat an online store is that it's treated like a regular bricks and mortar type of shop. You do need the time and investment to get it to the point where it's going to be successful for you. You can't simply just slap it together and expect it to work for you. You need time investment in it. You also need time to obviously process orders. You need time to deal with customers. You need all that kind of time. You need dedicated time to it. So don't treat it as a side thing. Treat it as an actual store that you need to give attention to. Okay. So in summary, you need payment gateway, you need shipping, you need a good product catalog, and you need time.
Great. So is e-commerce an expensive and lengthy process to set up?
No. And this is the beauty of it, is while you need the time to invest in it, it doesn't cost the same as setting up a normal bricks and mortar store, because obviously you don't need signage, you don't need shop fitting, you don't need rent. And that's also one of the beauties of going for an e-commerce platform, is that you do open up another outlet that is open 24 hours that you don't need to actually physically be in a location for. Now, it's given an idea in terms of cost. There's two options that you can go with an e-commerce store. You could either do a self-hosted or a hosted option. Now, there's benefits to both. So if you want to get up and running really, really quickly, and you don't want to have any of the hassle of having to deal with hosting or security or anything in the back end, then a hosted option is your best option. A good example of that would be something like Shopify. Shopify takes all the hassle off your hands. You can have a Shopify store up really, really quickly. It allows you to build your store really quickly. You can put all your products in, and it can be up and running almost in no time. The difference is that on a hosted option is your monthly costs are going to be higher, but your hassles are going to be less. And often the interfaces in that on the hosted options are a lot easier for people to load, because they're dealing with a lot of people who aren't technically minded. They want to make it as easy as possible for you to build a store. So the hosted option is good to go. You can be up and running in no time, and most of the payment gateways and the shipping options will work with things like Shopify. The alternative option is self-hosted. Now, self-hosted is an option where you'll put that on your own hosting, on your own space, on your own website. So if you have an existing website, you'll more than likely want your own self-hosted option. The benefits of a self-hosted option is when you buy one of these e-commerce platforms, like if you use WooCommerce, PrestaShop, Magento, OpenCart, Commerce, a lot of these are free upfront. There's no cost to buy them whatsoever. So you can be up and running, install it, and start putting your store together. Then your only cost then per month is your hosting cost. So unlike things like Shopify, which as you add more and more modules and items to your store, could potentially become more expensive on a monthly basis. With a self-hosted cost, your only cost is going to be your hosting. So the only problem there with the self-hosted is you could either do it yourself, or you could use a company like Dhl, where we would build the actual shop for you. So you'll have an upfront cost to get you going, but then your long-term cost will be cheap because it's just your hosting cost. Then the other benefit that we find with the self-hosted options is they're infinitely customizable. We've just built a store where a customer rents out dresses, and that wasn't possible, for example, on Shopify or any of the other systems. So a self-hosted system allows you to build customized modules and options within that. And in the self-hosted option, there's, like, for example, we know WooCommerce really well. Now, WooCommerce alone probably has about 30,000 plugins that are available to customize features within the system. Whereas, like, if you want to add more customizable features on things like Shopify and that, you do find a lot of those modules become expensive and they often become a monthly cost. So you need to kind of look at the two and see which way you want to go and which works for you. The hosted option is quick and easy. You'll be up and running in no time. The only problem though is if you have an existing website and you want to use something like a hosted option, it means you kind of got to then move your whole operation onto their system. So it has to be on their system, onto their hosted option. Then the other thing you need to also consider is scalability. So as your shop grows, now, a lot of the customers that we see come in who need shops are often fairly small setups, maybe 1 to 7 kinds of stores. They are countrywide, but it's not enough demand that they need to have a massive system like a Takealot. You could really work on a very easy, a shared hosting platform, no problems. So in terms of scalability, if you feel this is going to become massive and it's going to become a huge project, a hosted option takes a lot of that pressure off you because their systems will just scale in terms of bandwidth, in terms of requirements as your store grows. On a self-hosted option, you just got to make sure you're on a better package and you use a good system to start with.
Okay, great. So I think you've already touched, Gerald, on mainly what the features it needs to have. So can we go to the fact of, can you just have a mobile-friendly website, or is an app necessary and why? Just if you can quickly touch on that.
Sure. So in the last one, is it expensive? Okay, to give you an upfront, I'll come back to this one. A lot of people will want to know cost. So to give you an idea, if you go to a design studio and you ask for them to help you set up an e-commerce store, prices will start for a self-hosted option from about 5,000 to get you going, and then after that, you're probably looking at your monthly hosting cost of maybe quarter 200 Rand a month. On a hosted option like Shopify, you're probably going to start off at about 650 a month, and with all the additional options, you could easily go up to 2,000 Rand a month for that option. Okay, back to the question. In order for a site to be user-friendly, it does need to be mobile. So a mobile, nowadays everyone speaks about mobile first. Mobile first is the most important way to go, especially for stores. You've got to consider the amount of users that are out there on mobile phones versus the guy sitting in front of a laptop or a PC. So it's paramount that your site is mobile first, and it needs to be really, really easy to use. Thankfully, all the software that you can use for all the e-commerce, all the hosted options do obviously take a mobile into consideration, and they are built mobile first. Any good system is built mobile first. So a lot of that pressure gets taken off you. And the things that you also got to consider on the mobile is that items need to download really quickly. It needs to be really, really fast. So on a hosted option, that will be taken care of because their servers will be quick and they'll be made sure that they're optimized. On the hosted option, on your own hosting option, you just got to make sure that you're on a good service provider that's got that your site's on a fast server. Otherwise, you could, it's detrimental. So yes, you do need to look at making sure that your site is mobile friendly. And what we find is the difference between doing a mobile friendly site and an app is, sorry, Megan, have I jumped a question or is that still the same one?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the mobile friendly website app.
Okay, on the next one, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so it was just, you were saying about the app, so I think you did address that. And then just if you can quickly touch on the can the printing and signage companies maximize e-commerce for personalization and customization by adding, say, a personalized t-shirt function to their website in terms of e-commerce and maybe face masks?
Definitely. So the one thing that we've seen about e-commerce is it is all about convenience. If you go to a website that you can buy a sign that you're looking for immediately, right off the bat, as you're sitting in front of the site, or Would you rather go and call a sign company, chat back and forth? People want the convenience. If they see something that they will buy it immediately. And quite honestly, convenience trumps price. You will buy something if it's more convenient. Even if it's 100 Rand more, you'll buy it because it's more convenient. And with the customization options that you can be doing nowadays, we've seen it a lot. For example, on business cards, we've built a couple of business card sites where you can customize the business cards online. And that's been really popular because people can design their card, order the print, and go to print straight away. And you see it quite a lot overseas with t-shirt printing sites where you can go on, you can design your t-shirt right there on the website, add more your colors, and it's calculating. So you add another color to the screen printing, and suddenly the price changes. So it's really dynamic, and you can see what as you're designing, your costs changing. It's brilliant. So it is definitely a way to go. But the only thing is, while a store takes quite a bit of set time to customize and put in your products, your straightforward products, I mean, a store's requirements are pretty straightforward. You can load a straightforward product that's got no variations. So you can say, well, I want to buy a widget, and that's it. There's no different sizes, there's no colors. Then a variable product will have sizes, colors, different variations that you can order. And when you get a customized product, it gets a little bit more complicated because the system will build the actual artwork and provide it to you to do the signage or do the print in the back end. And those systems are fairly heavy and they're fairly complex because you also got to provide the customer with a start point. So you've got to start them with items they can use, with shapes, designs, items, icons, images, and things that they can use in the design straight away. Obviously, they can import their own. But that whole setup of creating a customized system is almost double the time that it would take to set up a normal store. So you must allow for that, but it is an excellent idea because, again, price trumps convenience. Wrong way. Convenience trumps price. So you have to, if the more convenience you can build in, the better your site's going to do, and the more sales you're going to make. Then I just wanted to pick up on the difference between an app and a mobile-friendly site is. An app takes a lot of time to develop and it's a lot harder to change. So there are a lot of systems now where you can buy a ready-made app and you can actually customize, or you can link it to your e-commerce store. So you can actually then just have an app version of your e-commerce store. There's a lot more of this happening now, so you can extend into that space. But what we find is if you're getting started on your e-commerce site, you really don't need an app because you want to be found online and you want to be able to people to find you quickly. Once you're established and you've become a store and you've become something like a Takealot, then definitely an app is a good idea. But initially, you don't need an app. Most of these sites will work perfectly on a mobile phone and give you just as good as the experience quite often that an app can do. So what we found is, as long as the site is optimized for mobile, there's absolutely no need for an app.
Okay, great, Gerald. I'm just going to stop you there, and we can address the question in the questions section. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to Marcus now. So Marcus, why is SEO important?
Sorry. I beg your pardon?
Great. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. I was saying that all the good points that Jared touched on building a good e-commerce website, all of that is good, but you need for it to be available on the search engine result pages. So SEO is important for greater searchability and visibility, but there's always much more value than that. So gaining new customers can be hard. So you can have a good website, but no one visiting it. So Google gives us that in the online shopping experience, 44% of all users start off by Google or Bing or just a search engine. So that's how it all starts. So SEO is important in that aspect, that it gives you organic search results and it becomes a primary source of traffic for users that are coming to your site. And it also builds trust and credibility. So when people constantly, when they search and they see your results organically, if you engage in good link building exercises, when people see your site on other sites, and SEO also means good user experience. So when people come to your site, it's very important that they find the user journey is that it's much easier for them to convert. They find the product that they're looking for. The method that they should be converting is there, and it's easily relatable to them. So all of that, that's why SEO is important. And also SEO compared to other form of marketing, it's relatively cheap and is also a long-term strategy.
Okay, great. Then can businesses do their own SEO or should they outsource this function?
So that's a very interesting question. I think there are pros and cons between the two. But when it comes to an agency, you get like thought leaders, you get people that know their stuff. So in an agency, you're generally surrounded by people that are leaders in their field. And they are on top of cutting edge industry trends. So whatever tool is there, whatever industry trends are there, agencies that are usually on top of it. Agencies usually have a diverse client portfolio. So in an agency, you are not tied to one or niche or one type of client. So it doesn't get boring. So your website won't get boring to an agency because they're working on a huge amount of things. So whatever industry, whatever target market that you have, an agency is more likely to have a specialist who can be able to help you. And they have the highest allure for digital, and they can also ensure that your site stays relevant, it stays fresh and authoritative, and it adheres to all best practices at all times. So the only con is that agencies usually have a high staff turnover. So if you don't mind your site getting worked on by a couple of people, then that's fine. But I think based on experience, I'll say like you should outsource this function. You should choose an agency.
Okay, great. Then how can businesses make sure that their content is relevant, fresh, and ranks high on Google?
Okay, so Google is it's very interesting compared to other search engines where they just follow the trends that Google do in terms of how things are going to be ranking. So the most important thing is keyword research, right? So you should understand you should understand your market. What are people looking for? What you are trying to rank for, and which search terms are important for you. But also, you must also look at your competitor keyword research. Try to do keyword research for your competitors. Look what they're trying to rank for. Look how they are doing it. Look at their content and stuff like that. So keyword research will give you important information such as the competitiveness of the search term that you're trying to rank for, how many people are actually searching for that term. So you'll be able to have a content strategy that is answering your users' questions, because you'll be able to have all that information for the keyword research. And also, in regards to content, because this is a e-commerce website, it's important that you look at the reviews and comments from your users. So use that as a form of research to be able to inform not only your content strategy, but your overall SEM strategy. So another thing is also, like most websites have this search feature where you can search something that you're looking for. So mine that data. So use that data as a data to answer the questions that users, when they come for your site, look for. So what I'm saying is that as much as your content strategist will have all these ideas about content that you might need or that will be fresh on the site, it's much more important to answer questions that users have on your site in regards to content. So mine content from your reviews and your questions, keyword research, and also mine content from your search feature on your site.
Okay, great. Then what are the tools that Google provides specifically for e-commerce websites to maximize their SEO?
Okay. So I think in e-commerce, the important thing is that you're trying to do is have sales. So have people to convert. So for you to do that, you must be able to answer the questions, why are they not converting? And those who are converted, what is it that you did that helped them convert? So Google answers that questions in terms of tagging. So they've got this nifty tool called Google Tag Manager. So with Google Tag Manager, it helps reduces the number of scripts that you have on your website. So, like speed is one of the ranking factors for a website on Google. So if you have a number of scripts when you're tracking all this user journey, it might slow down your website. So you can use Google Tag Manager that is given by us by Google. And also, like, you can also create like custom events and custom tracking practices, also using Google Analytics. So in e-commerce, what's important is that everything that happens to on your website, you are able to track it, so you get data from it. So you can use that data that in a user journey, a user comes to this point, but they drop off here. So you can see, is it the content here is not clear enough, the content here is not fresh, or is the creative here not working? So it's important that you tag. So I think for an e-commerce site to maximize, they must use Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. It's very important for you to see where users are coming in, when they're dropping off, and so forth.
Okay, great. Then how often do you need to update the SEO of your site?
So I think, as I said, that because Google algorithms and other search engines, they're fluid, they're not static. And your website is not static, it's always changing. You always, especially on e-commerce, always adding new products, removing obsolete products and stuff like that. It should be an always on strategy. It should be a strategy that you always implementing on. So for an example, let's say you sell socks on your site, right? So this time of the year is peak season. More users are coming on your site, meaning that more users are going to be clicking through, exploring more pages on your website. So it's important that you have someone dedicated who are making sure, like, who constantly look at the data and making sure that those users that come to the site, they have good user experience. That those users that come to the site don't have pages that have fall for errors, don't have pages that have links that are not working. So it should be an always on strategy.
Okay, great. Then how do you measure the effectiveness of the SEO?
Oh, okay. So because you've built this perfect e-commerce website, what's very important is that you compare it on how it adheres to Google's best practices. So the first one is the technical, right? So you measure, you benchmark your current website where it is compared to what Google requires a site should be for it to rank properly. So you look at on-page optimization, you look at the site structure, how is the site fast enough, you look at internal linking, you look at usability, can a person use the site with no errors, and most importantly, as Gerald mentioned, you look at the mobile friendliness. So Google 2 years ago launched mobile first crawling. So meaning that your mobile version of your site determined how your site ranks on Google. So before, it used to be your desktop version of your site determines how you rank on Google. So now it's your mobile version of your site that determines where your rankings are. So I think the most important thing is technically make sure that your site adheres to all best practices. Everything's fine. The site loads quick enough. There is no scripts or JavaScript that's loading in the background that's making the site slow. And number two is analytics. So benchmark how many users you have on your site, which pages your users visit, how long do they stay on the site, and where do they drop off. Bounce rate is very important, especially on e-commerce. Do users bounce off as they are about to convert, or users bounce off on the informational phase? Users bounce off on the research competitiveness stage. So all of that is available on your Google Analytics. And I think the third one that we can use is you look at your number of conversions as your effectiveness of SEO. So the number of organic conversions before you did the first two. So the first two is optimizing your site technically and make sure everything is tagged on analytics. So then you look at the conversions. How many people are converting? You look at the user journey, and I think that will be able to tell you a story on how effective is your SEO strategy.
Great, thanks so much, Marcus. I'm going to go into to Jared now.
Cool.
Let me just bring this. So, Jared, firstly, why is paid for advertising important?
Well, I think it's really like kind of telling the story of someone winking at someone in the dark. You really know what you're doing, but no one else does. So looking at this slide, it's kind of to put it into perspective within the Facebook context. Let's, for instance, say we had a fan base of around 32,000, which is the light blue bubble. With an organic post, based off Facebook algorithms, you're most likely only going to reach 725 of them, which is essentially only about 2.25% of your total fan base. And that's, of course, if you're lucky. So with similar or lookalike audiences, you would be able to obviously reach a bigger base, potentially 71 times more with a small media investment alongside your organic post.
Great. And then can you please share your perspective on the best practice for paid for advertising promoting e-commerce sites?
So I think it's about really creating a basic framework of what you want to achieve throughout the process. So within that basic framework, it's about constantly enriching, analyzing, and adjusting, and knowing that the data that you collect depreciates over time. But in doing this, it allows you to spend smarter. So reducing marketing costs by frequency capping so that you don't pass the point of diminishing returns. It allows you to develop consumer insights. So by building up that data, you then overlay that into your analytics or onto your CRM list or your first party data list. It also allows you to create lookalike audiences, which then allow you to build your first party data into the likes of a Facebook or a Google or whatnot, and then build models of those current audiences based off interests or demographics, and then target against those expanded audiences so that you can expand your reach. Lastly, it's just about cross-selling and upselling. So based off customer attributes who are the most likely to convert or who have converted before.
Great. Then how do you suggest optimizing website content for better conversions?
So I think, I mean, media is just one step of that funnel conversion, but I think it's about understanding the full user journey and mapping that out. So what I've displayed here is just a scenario of kind of landing pages. And while I'm no creative, I just wanted to kind of give you an example. So let's say we were selling oranges from a media banner. That media banner then drove to a veggie landing page for the family. Unfortunately, it doesn't link directly to oranges. So someone then needs to find their way to the orange page and can browse maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 pages before checking out or converting. In the second scenario, we drive them from a very clear orange message to a pineapple recipe page, for example. Obviously, not being relevant, they might drop off immediately. The third scenario is very much the same. So they browse through 1, 2, 3 pages and then potentially drop off without even converting. But ultimately what we want to do is we want to drive them from an orange message to an orange landing page through to an orange conversion page, essentially, with a seamless user journey.
Great. Then what messaging should brands selling online focus on?
So I think it's just about understanding that there's a basic funnel in which an online consumer engages in the purchasing cycle. These being awareness, consideration, and conversion. I mean, we can try and push conversion as much as possible, but remember, we need to reach people, push a brand message that's relevant and entertaining, and then direct them through to converting at the end of the day. Ultimately, this is not a one-step process. So within the discovery or awareness phase, it's really about mass reach and prospecting for new users. And within that, how do we push a brand message that's entertaining or that tells a specific message about the product? So here, like I said, I'm no creative, but hand-picked oranges or tree-ripened oranges. There's not necessarily a call to action here, but it's a brand message. Within the second phase, exploration or consideration, how do we influence those customers to convert or to obviously engage with the brand? So it could be a reinforcement of the message. So they've been to the site. How do we get them to view our range again or even find out more? And that find out more would be your call to action. And then lastly, from an in-market or conversion perspective, it's about converting those in-market customers with a hard call to action. And that hard call to action could be specific to their browsing behavior or how they've engaged on the site, or just an overall generic message with a 25% off only today, click here now.
Then what are the best ways to really get to know your target audience, and how do you convert them into your biggest fans?
So I know this looks quite intricate, but I think what we're trying to show here is that the customer needs to be at the heart of everything that we do. So if we look at the 3 key M's, which is the mind, which is the thought process of the consumer, they go through different stages: exploration, engagement, decision-making. If you look at the buying cycle, which is the marketing side of it, awareness, consideration, and conversion funnels, obviously backed up by service and the product, along with the media touch points. By creating a funneled approach and delivering against their core need, along with a service, after-sales service, I definitely think that advocacy and loyalty come hand in hand with that.
Great. Then, is personalization more effective than mass advertising, and why?
So I think this quote really sums it up for me. I mean, if we look at the quote from Nelson Mandela, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to a man in his language, that goes to his heart. I don't know about you, but a personal message for me really resonates.
Definitely. Then, in your opinion, which local e-commerce site is running an effective paid for advertising campaign?
So I'd love to promote some of the brands that we work on here at MediaShop, but I think that Woolworths is definitely doing a great job at how they've structured it in terms of their loyalty program and how they set that up. With the use of their rewards platform, they collect purchase data based on individual preferences, and then they customize specific deals in-store and online that are relevant to customers' previous purchase history. So it's really personalized at scale.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to cross over to Derek now. So Derek, what is the payment revolution for e-commerce websites?
Sure. Thank you, and hello to everyone out there. I think when we talk about a payment revolution, I think there's a couple of things that we need to kind of take into account before jumping into that answer. The first is, and particularly in South Africa, is we have a massively over-indebted economy. If you look at some of the stats and you look at the numbers that are out there at the moment, the average household is spending up to 75% of their income on servicing debt on a month-to-month basis. Now that's obviously the average household, so there's swings and roundabouts in that kind of number. On a global basis, you can have a look around and you look at the credit companies and the loans companies, and 1 in 100 people on a global basis are in arrears when it comes to paying their debts. The next kind of element that comes into the mix here is that the world is starting to change. And we like to use the term millennials, and I normally have a little bit of a shake every time I use that word because I kind of think of it as the guys that are 18, 19 years old. But the reality is that the millennial generation right now is anybody up to the age of around 38. So the millennial generation is becoming a very pertinent part of the buying economy, both in bricks and mortar and in the retail space. Now, the millennial economy, or the average millennial, is very aware of the world, and they're very aware of the ills or the dangers of credit and of debt. And they're looking at multiple different ways of managing and ensuring that they don't end up in debt or spending money on credit. So we talk a lot about the fact that millennials don't buy properties, they rent. Millennials will stay away from credit cards. In fact, one of the interesting searches that we've seen out of our parent company in Australia, Zip, is that people are more likely to search for how to cut up your credit card than they are to search for how to open a credit card. So there's lots of angst, and there's lots of move away from people using credit in the market as a whole. And that's quite an important thing when it comes to people shopping online, because the predominant means of paying for goods online is through a credit card. And what we're seeing on a global basis is that credit cards are being issued less and less, and debit cards are being issued more and more. But that now introduces a new little complexity, because, well, how do people pay for things that they can't afford right now? And what we've started seeing on a global basis is there is this new way of buying things, which is called buy now, pay later. It was originally kind of coined and started in Australia. Today in Australia, there's roughly 10 million people that use buy now, pay later services, such as in Europe, there's 20 odd million people using those services through companies like Klarna. In the United States, buy now, pay later started toward the end of last year, with Afterpay and Zip going into the market. And in just on 6 months, they've got 10 million customers using buy now, pay later on a regular basis. So what is buy now, pay later? It's basically the ability to use your debit card to buy goods today, receive the goods today, and pay for those over a period of time without paying interest or without paying any fees. Basically, it turns the model on its head slightly, where the merchant actually funds a slightly higher commission, and that means that the customer can now shop and spread their payments over 2 paychecks, which ultimately ends up allowing the consumer to be in a better position long term. The example I always like to give is, if someone goes and buys something on credit today, you're likely to be, let's say you spend 1,000 Rand online today, you're likely to spend anywhere between 1,200 and 1,500 Rand on that particular good once you've paid off the interest. Whereas through buy now, pay later, the 1,000 Rand that you spend is 1,000 Rand that you spend. So you don't eat into your wallet at all.
Great. Then what technical innovations are available now to make online retail a seamless experience?
Sure. There's lots of interesting things, and I think there's always stuff that's changing all the time. But I think the things that are most important in terms of the audience that are here today is things like Amazon One Click or Klarna Checkout, Apple or Google Pay. And what those are essentially services that have been created by Amazon, Klarna, Apple, and Google to make the checkout process that much more quicker and effective. Now, the big 4 banks in South Africa and Payflex, we've kind of followed suit in that, and we've created the similar kind of checkout capability. So when a customer comes in, they log into your store and they purchase the goods, they're able to then check out with one click. They don't have to re-enter their credit card details. They don't have to, or debit card details. They're able to check out in a very seamless and a very quick process. There's other kind of innovations that have come into the market as well. So guys like Ozo, or they provide an instant EFT option. So people who don't have credit cards or debit cards and they don't want to put their details online, they're able to check out using an instant EFT, which is a whole bunch of technical integration in the background, which allows you to zoom straight through to your bank account, make the EFT on your bank account, and that reflects immediately in the online retailer space. So no need to kind of wait for your goods to be shipped because you're waiting for an EFT confirmation. And then there's the likes of Zapper and SnapScan, who have integrated their QR code technology that they use in the bricks and mortar world into the online space. So lots of interesting things and lots of different options that allow for payments on the online space.
Great. Then how can you increase your online cart checkout sales, and what are the reasons that shoppers abandon their carts?
Sure. This is something that a lot of people kind of rack their hair about. They have sleepless nights about. There are a couple of key things, and I always like to use an example of my mother-in-law, who a little while ago had gone camping. She came back from camping. She'd broken a particular piece of one of her cooking stoves, and she found the replacement piece online, and then she totted off to the website. And about 45 minutes later, she came through to me and she said, "Derek, you've got to help me. I can't log out. I can't get this thing completed. I tried, and I thought I was a technically savvy guy, and it took me about 15 minutes to figure out how to get through the checkout process. And I can assure you, if it wasn't my mother-in-law sitting over my shoulder, I probably would have dropped out of the process a lot earlier." So the first element is checkout has to be simple and seamless for the consumer. If you think about going into a store, you go in, to use Jared's example earlier, you pick up your oranges, you go to the till, you pay for your oranges, and you leave. You don't want to change that experience for a consumer at the end of the day when they're online. It has to be simple, quick, and seamless. That's the first thing to change. The second thing is you can't have surprises. And what a lot of people do on their websites is they keep the delivery charges or service fees hidden until the last moment. And that's a big no-no. You're building a relationship of trust with your customer. And if they are thinking they're getting a good deal until they get to the checkout point and they learn at the checkout point that there's more fees or there's more costs, you destroy that trust instantly. And they drop out of the checkout process, and you're likely to not have them come back and shop with you in the future. The last kind of element for me is always around instant payment options. You've got to find as many payment options for the customer to pay you that are simple and straightforward. You don't want, going back to the oranges example, you don't want to get to the till and say, right, yeah, I'd like to buy my oranges, but let me apply for credit. Okay, you can apply for credit, but we're going to get back to you in 2 days' time and tell you whether or not you can have your oranges. You've got to have a process that allows the customer to get what they want immediately and have that delivered quickly.
Great. Then are there payment platforms that plug into accounting software?
Sure. Yeah. Look, I think that's pretty generic now. A couple of years ago, that was, not necessarily heard of, and it was difficult to find those. But today, pretty much all the payment platforms do integrate into any number of different accounting platforms, unless you've got some really obscure accounting platform that you've got. In some cases, there are plugins that makes it relatively simple. So if you're on Shopify or WooCommerce or one of those kind of things, the plugins are relatively straightforward and can be done within a couple of hours. If you're on a bespoke platform that you've developed yourself, then that plugin is going to have to be developed for you. But in all cases, that integration does happen. It's just sometimes more difficult than others.
And then do you still need a dedicated accounts person overseeing the online payments?
So I think just going back to the previous question, if you do the hard yards up front, you shouldn't. One of the unique or the interesting things that everybody likes about being online is it's a way to take out a lot of the manual work that's involved. So if you are doing your integration up front and you do it properly up front and you go through all the hard yards of making sure you have all the connections, you are able to reduce your accounting function to a large extent. You can never get rid of it completely, but you are able to reduce it to a large extent.
Then who is keeping the payment details safe?
Sure. There's a couple of things there. So globally, there's something called Gdpr, which originated out of the UK, which sets a whole host of standards in terms of how data needs to be kept and how long it can be kept for. It's very similar to our POPI regulation in South Africa. That's I see there's some articles about that in the press today, saying that that's now in full effect from 1 July, but will only really be policed in a year's time. And then there's Pci Compliance. And Pci Compliance is a set of regulations in South Africa that dictate the level of security and the way in which debit and credit information can be kept on a website. and how it can be presented online back to a customer. And those kind of things are all managed largely by the big hosting companies. So, if you're hosted by Amazon Web Services or you're hosted by Microsoft, they take into account that PCI compliance capability as well. You do pay a little bit more for that, but it takes care of that headache for you.
Great. Then lastly, is online retail overtaking in-store retail, or can they coexist?
No, so it's definitely a coexist situation. I think as with everything, human nature is always about someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. But the reality is that there's going to be this coexistence between the bricks and mortar space and the online retail space. Right now, online retail accounts for between 2 and 4% of total retail in South Africa. We're expecting that number to start edging towards 10%. The COVID, the lockdown, and that has already pushed that. We see things like so online cycle stores, online golfing stores having increased their turnover by anywhere between 400 and 1,000%. We see online groceries increasing by 500 to 600%, but that's largely driven by the lockdown. We expect that to come down a little bit over the next little while, but into the future, we're always going to see both of those worlds living together.
Great, thanks so much. I'm going to go over to Vanessa now. So Vanessa, e-commerce shipping is the final step in the process. What e-commerce, logistics, and fulfillment services does DHL provide?
Okay, Megan, thanks very much. So we fully appreciate that there's a huge amount of work that's gone into creating the shipment that materializes at the end of this process, from setup of the website to marketing it and obviously having the correct payment gateway available. As an organization and certainly as an industry, we have a massive vested interest in making sure that that last mile customer delivery is a positive one, primarily so that we're in a position where we achieve a virtuous cycle, not of making the first sale, but obviously the second, third, fourth, and fifth thereafter. So as far as DHL's particular service offering is concerned, we've built our e-commerce capability on the back of our fundamental purpose, which is to deliver consignments from point A to point B in the fastest possible time. So from a service offering point of view, we were able to do that for both domestic, so deliveries within South Africa, for instance, and with a keen focus on international deliveries as well. We're particularly intrigued by the possibility that comes from international trade, and we think that's a hugely undercapitalized opportunity, not just in South Africa, but in Africa and to some extent in the rest of the world. So we're able to facilitate those deliveries, be they local deliveries or international ones. And then we've got some additional flexibility with regards to how, for example, customs charges are paid for. And then, of course, at a very fundamental level, if you talk about services in particular, the ability to support our customers to create the waybill, which is obviously integral to a successful delivery, as well as for international deliveries, the commercial invoice that will be presented for both export purposes as well as import purposes at destination.
Great. Then how does your online system plug into other e-commerce systems? Is this integrated or separate?
Okay, so we have the ability to fully integrate into our customer websites, particularly if they're on the more popular platforms like WooCommerce, Magento, Shopify, etc. It's a particular application called Dhl Express Commerce, and what's particularly intriguing about it is that it really does simplify the entire logistics process, and primarily because we know that we service a range of customers, so everyone from enterprise organizations to small and medium-sized businesses. So reducing the complexity, making that shipping process less onerous is our single biggest priority. So through Dhl Express Commerce, we're able to, as I mentioned previously, produce the waybills, but also to give visibility on the expected transit time, and then of course, very importantly, to make sure that both the receiver and the sender have got visibility of the proof of delivery. So again, we're reinforcing that positive customer experience.
Great. Then what needs to be in place for smooth and tiniest delivery of a product ordered online?
It's a superb question. So the first and most obvious answer is if it's a local, as in a South African delivery, it's a little bit less complex. So very simply having a comprehensive delivery address and be able to understand that you want to reach your customer at the date, time, and location that's most convenient for them. So for instance, understanding whether you'd prefer to offer a work delivery when things return to the new normal, so to speak, or whether it's a home delivery. And if it's a home delivery, making sure that there is correct address information, contact numbers, that sort of thing. Without a doubt, when you're going international, so either for delivery elsewhere on this continent or anywhere else in the world, it becomes a little bit more complex, but certainly well worth the effort, because understanding, for example, what is restricted versus prohibited for importation into other countries is helpful in that you're able to determine whether there's appetite in a market for your particular product. But of course, also in whether it's a domestic or an international delivery, a really fundamental requirement is to make sure that the consignment is correctly packaged, particularly if it's of a fragile nature. And of course, we rely very heavily on our customers to confirm what's appropriate in that instance, because they know their product best.
Then what determines the cost and timeline from an online order to delivery?
Okay, so very simply, it's the cost is a result of the origin and the destination of the consignment, so be it a local or an international delivery. Without a doubt, the actual weight, and then a key consideration, which is unfortunately sometimes overlooked, is the physical size of the consignment. So understanding, for example, the dimensions of the package itself, and that's applicable for both domestic and international deliveries, quite simply because we as an organization, and it's an industry standard, are billed by the airlines based on not just the physical weight of the cargo that we place with them, but also the amount of space that we take up on a particular aircraft. So understanding the dimensions of the consignment and the resulting volumetric weight, as well as the actual weight, is going to be a key consideration. Most transit times, though, from an expectation point of view, can vary. So, for instance, one of the things that we strongly encourage all of our customers to do is to consider providing their customers with delivery options. As DHL Express, we advocate for an express service, so we can deliver domestically to most places overnight, internationally within 2 to 4 days, just about anywhere in the world. But there are instances where either the product or the target audience might want a deferred service. And so it's important to be able to make those decisions upfront in order to really create a meaningful connection with your existing and potential customers.
Great. Then is a dedicated personal team needed to oversee the execution of online deliveries?
Hopefully not, because we work really hard to demystify the logistics process and to make it as simple and convenient as possible for all types of customers. We fully appreciate that, particularly whether it's a small or medium-sized business, resources are very often constrained. So we work very closely with customers to make sure firstly, that they've identified the correct or the best fit as far as logistic partner is concerned. And we definitely work to make sure that we automate as much of the dispatch process as possible, not just in creating the shipment paperwork, so to speak, but also returning invoices electronically, proof of delivery information electronically, so that, again, it's not a deliberate effort either to send or to receive information back that then enables follow-up, for example, with the customers who've been serviced.
Then lastly, what functionality does DHL offer to make the process as seamless as possible?
All right, so where do I begin? One of the best parts of e-commerce for us as an organization, both here in Sub-Saharan Africa and globally, is the fact that e-commerce has in many ways driven a huge amount of innovation in our business. And a big part of that is in response to the sense of immediacy. So it was mentioned earlier, for example, Derek spoke about the millennials. We don't blame the millennials for everything. We don't attribute all the good things to millennials either. But there's a very specific behavior that's emerged from understanding the difference in the various groups of consumers that are serviced through e-commerce. And as a result of that, we've invested in some really interesting technology. So for instance, apart from Dhl Express Commerce, which is the plugin, we've got a functionality called on-demand delivery, where we allow the receiver to select the date and time and also location potentially on where they wish to receive their delivery. So it's an automated engagement that as the consignment is on its way to them, it will give them a notification and they can say, actually, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock doesn't suit me. Please can I have delivery on Thursday morning between 2 and 4, for instance. And again, have the opportunity to change location. On the point of location, apart from either having a home or a work delivery, we've also invested in quite an extensive network of parcel lockers. So in South Africa, you'd be more familiar with some of our industry partners who've placed them, for example, at filling stations. But certainly elsewhere on this continent and around the world, you've got these banks of parcel lockers where the item is placed into there, and then people, on their daily commute or at a date or a time that's convenient for them, will be able to go and access that particular location and collect their product at their convenience. I think the last thing that I will mention is we've also really become very invested in understanding our customer's journey in servicing their customer. And so as a business, and this might sound quite odd for an international logistics company to say, we've invested a huge amount of money in research and the publication of really short, sharp reads, best practices identified from elsewhere in the world, data from elsewhere in the world and from this continent that will, with any luck, support our customers to make informed decisions as to where they make their investments, the kinds of markets they wish to target, the kind of products that are very popular at the moment. And of course, that's an incredibly humbling experience because as an international organization, we've got a very firm focus on two things. One is to bring the rest of the world's products to this continent, but equally to take this continent's products to the rest of the country and of course the rest of the world. And so being able to play just a small part in that process is incredibly rewarding.
Great, thanks so much, Vanessa. I'm just going to do a quick question and answer session. I see luckily our panelists have been very diligent in answering most of the questions. Just Derek, I see that you are replying to Jeremy's question, which I think is probably relevant for everyone to know. But Jeremy's asking, between payment gateways in South Africa, what are the key reasons to use either PayPast, PayFlex versus PayPal?
Sure, thanks.
Thanks. I think you gave me a little bit of a get out of jail card free there because it was turning into quite a long explanation. The simplest way to answer that is all payment gateways are effectively the interface between your site, your bank account, and the customer's bank account. Now, something like PayPal is not a South African company. It then obviously means that a person's got to sign up with PayPal internationally first, put their credit card details on there, and then hope that PayPal is one of the payments options that is on the websites in South Africa. So PayPal, people tend to use it more for international transactions or purchasing from international websites. For local websites, a PayFast or a PayFlex tends to be the more common options. And again, they're performing pretty much the same function, which is interfacing the customer between the retailer's bank account and the customer's bank account. With one noted exception in the PayFlex case, we offer the customer the buy now, pay later option as well, which is effectively allowing the customer to buy goods today, get their goods tomorrow,
we settle you, the merchant, immediately. And then we will collect the payments over a 6-week period from the customer, and we don't charge them interest and we don't charge them any fees. So it just adds an additional way for customers to be able to afford goods. And what we see is a 30% increase in take up for customers. And when I say take up, that's the cart abandonment rate reducing, and we see people spending more because they're able to spread it over two pay cycles.
Okay, great. Then maybe this is also a question for you, Derek. Just coming in from Ruan. Does PayFlex support open cart?
I'm not sure are we on open cart? Not yet. We're busy in negotiations with the guys, but we'll be there shortly.
Okay, great. Thanks. And then just another question to the general panel. Maybe this is a question for you, Gerald. What would it cost to set up a marketplace site for buyers and sellers for the sale of multiple goods and providing online payments, kind of like a mini Alibaba sort of setup?
Actually, we're getting quite a lot of questions around this nowadays. So a marketplace site obviously allows you to go and list your products on someone else's site and allow you to sell without having to set up your own site. It is becoming more popular. Cost for a marketplace site is the same as setting up an e-commerce site, but all that happens is it allows for an extra edition where other people can log in and administer their own section of the marketplace. Ballpark figure to set up a marketplace site, I can't speak for all companies, but from our company, we'd probably be in the region of 10,000 upwards.
Great. And then I wanted to direct a question at Marcus. Just in terms of, has COVID-19 fast-tracked the adoption of e-commerce and created fundamental shifts in South Africans' online buying behavior?
Most people trying to do like quick SEO, trying to get a quick payment system. But it has fast-tracked, and I think also it has made people realize that they have it, that they need to adhere to best practices. So for an example, at Reprise, most of the customers that were coming through now, the clients that are coming through now, they were asking us like, how do I set it up from scratch? So only to find out that they've got some features, they just need to optimize it and stuff like that. So COVID-19 really helped in not only the user, but I think for the service providers to understand the importance of e-commerce and how to optimize it properly.
Great, thanks so much. And then I think, Jared, I'd like to direct the same question at you, just in terms of how you've seen COVID-19 fast-track the adoption of e-commerce and just creating the fundamental shifts in the buying behavior.
Sure. So I think the latest stat I read said that we saw over lockdown levels 4 and 5, a 47% increase in internet usage in South Africa, which essentially means that it equates to 2.8 million more daily unique users. And I think from a media perspective also, we saw the rise in gaming, social media, and Google searches. And then if we had to look at kind of the Google searches that were trending over kind of lockdown 4 and 5, most of them were very contextual, related to the likes of COVID or cigarette and alcohol bans, which I'm sure don't come as a surprise to anyone.
Great, thank you so much. And then maybe the next question let's start with Derek, just in terms of the challenges with e-commerce. Payment is quite a... can you just address that challenge in South Africa?
Sorry, Megan, you broke up there a little bit. What was the end?
Oh, so sorry. So just the challenges regarding e-commerce in South Africa, like payment trust. A lot of South Africans still... you did touch on it with the millennials, but there is a little bit of a trust issue. So can you just touch on that challenge in South Africa, and any other challenges you think we're facing with regards to e-commerce?
So the payments challenge is a security issue, and I think there's quite a bit of hype in the media about these phishing scams or people stealing credit cards, etc., etc. And the one kind of thing that we always kind of talk about when we get asked the question is, when you pay online or use your credit card details online, it's no different to using it in a bricks and mortar store. For two reasons. One, when you're in a bricks and mortar store, you're not going to leave your credit card lying around. You're not going to leave your credit card with your PIN lying around. And that's the same way you should approach online trading. Now, that's a pragmatic answer. It doesn't necessarily change how South African behavior is. We tend to find that in the older generations, people are far more reluctant to put credit card details into an online site, whereas millennials are very quick to do it. So, as the millennial market becomes the bigger part of the overall market, you're going to see adoption of online payments more and more. But at the same time, things like COVID or lockdown have kind of given the necessary nudge to help people across the line and to start trusting the process. So that's the first thing. In terms of online as a whole, I think the question you asked earlier about how much has lockdown driven or made people do things differently. To give two quick examples, we work with a bottle store in Parkhurst. Prior to lockdown, they were mostly in or bricks and mortar. Now they are pretty much 90% online, and they have quadrupled their monthly revenue. And then in Durban, Cape Town, there's a crowd called Granadilla Board Shorts, and during lockdown they couldn't sell clothing at all, so they converted their business into selling vegan food. And so that's the uniqueness of the online space that allows you to adapt and move your business according to what's happening in the market very quickly. So, we don't see a lot of negatives, we see a lot of positives in the online space.
Great, thanks. So lastly, Vanessa, I'm also going to direct this question at you, just in terms of how has COVID-19 fast-tracked the adoption of e-commerce and created the fundamental shifts in the buying behavior?
So Megan, fair enough. It's a very, very different world out there for sure. So from a South African perspective, we've definitely seen a massive influx of products bought online elsewhere in the world, so from an import point of view, and then also being very privileged to be contacted by a number of customers looking for domestic delivery solutions here in South Africa. So no doubt, either in response to what happened as a result of lockdown, where they've seen a surge of online orders, or certainly gearing up for online orders. South Africa is very, very unique on the continent because of the really robust brick and mortar presence or retail environment. The rest of the continent has somewhat leapfrogged that physical store presence in many ways, and is a lot more open to online shopping. So without a doubt, in places like Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Angola, we've seen a massive surge over the last 3 months in online shopping. And then as far as the rest of the world is concerned, they've got about a 7-year head start on us as far as e-commerce goes. And what I can say there is that presently, DHL services all industries, obviously across all countries in the world. And at the moment, 1 in 5 of the packages we deliver are e-commerce related packages. So that's phenomenal, considering bundled into that statistic would be packages from the oil and gas sector, the life sciences sector, engineering and manufacturing. 1 in 5 deliveries is e-commerce. So without a doubt, it's a fast growing sector, and we expect that trajectory to continue for some time to come still.
Great, thank you so much. That is we've reached the time limit now. I just want to say thank you so much to all our panelists, our sponsors, In Detail and DHL, and to the audience for joining us. Look out for our wrap-up article on the webinar on the modernmarketing.com website later this week. Thank you and keep safe.
Thank you.